we did not have the resources inside Ottawa Police, nor did we have the expertise in terms of, setting out a real plan on how you're going to get this tiger by the tail inside police. We just hadn't had much experience with this. And so that's what I took from what Chief Slowly is that we're going to need a lot of help.
And what was your understanding of the reason that there was very little that could be done to limit access to further vehicles wanting to enter the downtown core?
There seemed to be a view that there was a charter right to allow those vehicles into that area. And also, I had taken that up with the city manager, Steve Kanalakis, in an email exchange I did with Mr. Kanalakis. And he said that there were no other places for the vehicles to go, basically. So that seemed to be their view, those sort of conflicting views, but the two that I had heard at the time why the vehicles were there.
The service later, however, highlighted the need for additional legal supports in both the short and medium term, requesting assistance to find uncharted legal territory. The service referenced the criminal code as being archaic and both the Provincial Highway Traffic Act and City of Ottawa bylaws as being limited in that they all failed to consider events such as the trucker convoy. Do you recall who said this?
I believe it was Chief Slowly.
And what did you understand this to be, to mean?
Well, just that we didn't have the tools that we needed in terms of this specific convoy with large 18-wheel vehicles to be able to effectively address legal issues around that, because this had not perhaps ever been considered in terms of criminal code or even our own Ottawa bylaws in the past.
Did you understand it to be saying that they needed new enforcement authority to effectively end these events?
I don't know that I would say I understood it just to mean enforcement authority. I think I understood it to mean that the actual policies that were in place under those acts were insufficient to deal with this particular event. I think this was the real point of tension in the whole thing, that we needed to have a solid plan, there needed to be properly resourced, and there was this continuing tension that we weren't getting the resources that we needed. And by then, the incidents had happened in, I think, Coutts, Alberta, and at the Ambassador Bridge and other places, and there appeared that the resources flowed easier to other locations than they flowed to Ottawa. So it was a point of contention. Accusations, they clearly came from within the service. And Chief Slowly had been intimating to me that there was infighting occurring inside Ottawa Police. I didn't ask him for a lot of detail on that, nor did he share a lot of detail. He did tell me that Deputy Chief Trish Ferguson had gotten caught up with some of the wrong elements in that, and he had to send her home for a number of days, which was in the middle of a crisis, so obviously extremely worrisome. He had told me that the incident commander had changed more than once during this crisis, and so there was obviously this other problem that we had, that inside Ottawa Police, probably not well known to the public, but inside Ottawa Police, there's a bit of an insurrection going on, and there seems to be an intent to use this crisis to undermine the chief further. That was my assessment of what I saw in that situation.
No votes were taken and no authority was delegated that would allow the chair to finalize an arrangement. Board members believe that they had mandated the chair to undertake a search for an external chief of police. board members insist on the fact that the board chair did not seek delegated authority to execute a contract for a new chief of police. And Mr. Arpin told me the other day that this information was provided to him by some of your fellow board members. I'm just interested in your response to this information.
Well, it is absolutely 100% false. Mr. Arpin did not ask me about this. There are in-camera board minutes available that refute this. It was the authority was delegated, unanimously delegated. And Mr. Arpin discussing this issue with board members, frankly, was putting them in a conflict of the code of conduct because this was in-camera information not to be shared. So it's wrong. He should not have been asking them about this in-camera meeting. And I mean, if a member of the board, and I wish perhaps you had asked who, but if a member of the board did provide that information, I would suggest to you that it was probably a board member that does not have a lot of governance experience and perhaps did not understand delegated authority. But it was a unanimous vote of the board that was focused on working together. My view, we needed to be in the same boat. We needed to be rowing in the same direction. We didn't need to be infighting or fighting amongst ourselves or, calling each other out. We needed to be working collaboratively every step of the way at all levels to bring this thing to a peaceful end. And I still believe that to this day. I mean, one of the issues I think at play here is that it was new. It wasn't like the G20. We didn't have a lot of preparation time to really get our ducks in a row, but we didn't work as smoothly together. It wasn't a well-oiled machine, and there were a lot of people, in my estimation, working at cross purposes here. And everybody, with the best of intentions, let's assume, but not necessarily working at their very best. And when people aren't working together, I don't think you get the best result, and I think that's what we saw. If I can take a moment to explain the sort of culture that exists at City Hall, the mayor has a group of councillors that are very supportive of his agenda, and generally speaking, will deliver to him any vote on any issue at any time. And so, and that's a reality. And I know that no motion of that magnitude would ever see its way onto the floor of council without the mayor's consent. And so when I got wind that this was being contemplated, I started asking the mayor's staff if this motion was coming, because I was very concerned about it. I didn't share it with Chief Slowly. I thought he had enough stress, frankly. And if it was never going to see the light of day on the council floor, I wasn't going to tell him about it.
See the paragraph in which Chief Slowly is speaking and comparing the situation to that of the 2011 Stanley Cup riots in Vancouver?
Yes.
And here he characterizes a distinction here in the last two sentences. He says the demonstration ongoing in Ottawa consisted of thousands of people convinced that the pandemic approach has been wrong, right?
Yes.
And that's an approach that was taken by not just municipalities, but by the federal government and, of course, by provincial governments across the country.
Yes, yes.
And he suggests that the service's intelligence at that time suggested that some participants, for them, being arrested, injured, or even killed was viewed as achieving a level of martyrdom rather than a deterrent.
You said that?
Yeah. Was that a serious concern when the board heard that?
I think all of this was taken seriously by the board, yes.
You talked about the priorities for this protest that you had and that the police service had, right? And the priorities were shared, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and those priorities were to provide a space for protest and to protect the right to protest.
Yes.
but to ensure that this protest happened without any loss of life or serious injury.
Correct.
And that, of course, is what happened, right?
It is.
But there were more trucks coming in after that first weekend, correct?
Yes, there were.
And did you ever get any answer to that from either Deputy Chief Bell or Chief Sloy about why more trucks were being allowed into downtown Ottawa after that first weekend?
Yeah, there were a number of questions being asked about that because, at one hand, first they were telling us that there was a constitutional right, there was nowhere else to put the trucks, they were allowed to come, then it was like, we're going to try and keep them out, and then they're coming in. It was a fluid situation.
Now, turning to your telephone call with the mayor the morning after Chief Sloy had resigned, and you were about to later that day announce that a new chief had been hired, correct?
Correct.
And so we've heard testimony from you already and Mayor Watson about it, and we've got this recorded conversation. I just want to ask you, did you record that conversation with the mayor because you didn't trust him completely? Is that fair?
Yes.
And, oh, by the way, incidentally, were you aware when you were having that conversation with the mayor that the mayor's staff were already working on a motion to remove you? Were you aware at that time?
I'd heard it, yeah.
But he didn't tell you that that's what he was trying to do?
No, I knew it.
Yes, Machiavelli had nothing on our mayor. Thank you very much, Ms. Deans. That's all I have.
Did you know about the tripartite meetings that the mayor was having with federal government elected officials on February 7th, 8th, and 10th of 2022 at the time?
No.
He didn't tell you about that?
No.
Okay, and so obviously you weren't invited.
I was not invited, no.
Right, and of course that meeting was about police resources.
Yes.
Right, and you're the chair of what you'll call the commission, the Ottawa Police Service Board.
Correct.
And so you run that board that decides how to dole out resources to the police, right?
Right.
You heard yesterday, and in the recording we heard that Mayor Watson claimed that he had concerns about your and your council's appointment of the proposed new interim chief, Matthew Torgan, because there was not enough consultation with stakeholders, right?
Right.
Before Steve Bell became the interim chief, how much consultation was there?
You mean at the very end when he...
Right at the beginning. So when Steve Bell took over as interim chief, how much consultation did Mayor Watson do?
I don't think he did any.
Right. So it's fair to say that the issue that Mayor Watson took with your council or your board appointing a chief on the basis that there was no consultation, it's fair to say he went about it and did no consultation and had his own appointed. Would you say that?
Yes.
Project Hendon. Can you describe for us what Project Hendon is?
Yes. You'll have to cut me short, probably. In 2019 and early 2020, the OPP witnessed a significant amount of protest, dissent, some of which caused us reasonable grounds to suspect or believe that those issues would engage in criminal activity or illegal activity that would have a public safety impact. As a result of that, we created a collection plan and reached out to partners in law enforcement and in the intelligence community to create a cooperative, collaborative approach to collect information on issues that related to that. The reasoning was many of these issues, I might say all of those issues, are larger than any specific jurisdiction. So we collected a collection plan, we made a collection plan, we created business rules, and we formally reached out to multiple agencies in Ontario, law enforcement, intelligence. We went further than Ontario, engaging federal agencies such as the RCMP, many components within the RCMP, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Department of National Defence, and then other police services were added as we went along because there was impact. So for example, the Vancouver Police Department, Sûreté du Québec, etc. The rationale for Hendon was to deal with large-scale protest matters that impacted public safety. very specifically, we did look at reasonable grounds to suspect and believe as a sort of precursor for our involvement. There seems to be a causal linkage in some people's minds between certain things that are not illegal or criminal, they just may not be in line with, and a nexus to somehow an intelligence threat. I can give you an example. I have had instances where people have approached me professionally because there were bumper stickers that had to do with entities that they disagreed with. So therefore, those people shouldn't be police officers, or they shouldn't be parked in parking lots. And I heard terminology, that person is right wing, so, and then therefore an assumption. I used to hear all that all the time about left wing, and I was very concerned about it because I worked in anti-terrorism at the time of the 9/11 attacks, and I saw what these knee-jerk reactions do, where we get information from the public on any number of issues related to what they perceive to be threats from Wahhabism or Salafism or Sunni extremism. And there always seems to be an overreach that comes with this politicization. And I've had many instances where I've been asked to go through these intelligence checks without the reasonable grounds to suspect or believe that there is a threat posed. There is merely the presence of something or someone that someone doesn't like.
Is it fair to say that at no point during the convoy protest did you receive reliable intelligence that would lead you to conclude that there was a risk to national security that would rise above the potential threat to national security that you identified in that report?
That's correct.
Is it fair to say that at no point during the convoy protest did you receive reliable intelligence that would lead you to conclude that there was a risk to national security that would rise above the potential threat to national security that you identified in that report?
That's correct.
I do not know where the political figures are acquiring information or intelligence on the extent of extremist involvement. So here, you're expressing the concern that this narrative around extremism is not consistent with the intelligence that you gathered, collected, reviewed over the course of the weeks leading up to these events.
That's correct. The impact and influence that was feared possibly by some American activists never occurred. A lot of this stems from pandemic legislation and grievance, but there were a raft of grievances involved here. Some, I would say, is anti-authoritarian. Some may have had to do with firearms legislation. Some had to do with oil and gas prices. There were a multitude of grievances that people possessed. Some was specific to individuals, such as the Prime Minister or the federal government. So there are a multitude of grievances occurring. Some was specific to our Premier Ford.
We've rented a giant Airbnb right next to the Trucker Commission of Inquiry. For the whole 6 weeks, we are going to staff it with Rebel News journalists. We're taking shifts. 15 of our reporters are going to cycle through this Ottawa studio, and we are going to cover the Trucker Commission of Inquiry as carefully and comprehensively as we cover the convoy itself. But I need your help. Please go to truckercommission.com to help me cover the extraordinary costs of this important journalistic mission. Thank you.